Well, joining me now is South Australian Liberal Senator Alex Antic. Senator, good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. So South Australians have done pretty well, just like they've done in Queensland. But if you're looking across the border into Victoria, how do you think they've handled things in recent weeks?
Well, thanks, Peter. Look, thanks for having me. Look, you're right. We've had a pretty good run here in SA, and it ultimately comes down to good government and good management, I think. We've had something like 440-odd cases throughout the course of the pandemic. Sadly, 4 deaths, but those numbers are, in the grand scheme of things, not too bad. Look, I think it's a very sad situation in Victoria. It's really precisely what the Prime Minister was trying to avoid, I guess. And what we've seen over there is, I guess, this sort of almost second wave. What we haven't seen, though, are for another day.
Scandal after scandal, the hotel quarantine scandal, and now this failure to adhere to the contact tracing guidelines, the national contact tracing guidelines. This looks to be getting worse before it's going to get better. 165 new cases yesterday alone, which is a consistent pattern. I think there are some real questions to be asked about the manner in which this government has maintained their order over there. And look, I hope things get better. I know the Morrison government is doing everything it can, sending ADF personnel, 800 Commonwealth staff, and even South Australia has sent 30 of our own health professionals over there to help out. We've all just got to pull together and do what we can.
There are these reports this morning, Senator, that the judicial inquiry is a lot different to a royal commission. It means, you know, that some of the witnesses who are brought forward, whether it be politicians or experts or whatever, they don't have to answer all of the questions. They also may not have to give any evidence. Would you have concerns about that?
Well, look, it's a pretty, I guess, clear way of dodging the question. I mean, one of the things that we haven't seen throughout this is heads roll. We haven't seen any ministers lose their job. We haven't seen the Premier of Victoria take any form of responsibility for this. Look, I guess one way to do it is to park it off into an inquiry. It's pretty disappointing, but we'll see what the outcome of that is.
No, and while you say that, I mean, to be fair, heads haven't rolled either in New South Wales when it comes to the Ruby Princess fiasco, and you know, we all know how that ended up, an absolute schmozzle. Do you think, Senator, that South Australia should open up its borders to, you know, say New South Wales and Queensland sooner?
Well, look, I obviously would love to see those borders opened up as soon as they can, and open to other parts of the country. But this Victorian experience does show that we still do need to proceed with a bit of caution. I think that's a fairly consistent position across the state. Look, people here want to get back to business as soon as possible, but this experience in Victoria shows that you can't be too hasty with it. You've got to go through the process. So, look, I think it's a bit of a hold and see type arrangement as it is, but let's hope we can get back to some sort of interstate travel as soon as possible.
Well, just on travel, I mean, and this is going to be brought up in National Cabinet later on today, but one of the issues that is going to be talked about is limiting overseas passengers. Is that something that you would support?
Look, I think we're probably not in a position at the moment to be considering too much entry from overseas. We have had this, I guess, announcement from the government just yesterday about the extension of visas and potentially bringing people in from Hong Kong, which is a great idea. But I think we need to be very, very careful at this stage. That 14-day quarantine period has to arrive. Look, as I said, I think this is very much a suck and see type approach at the moment, and I'd like to see that continue.
And on the masks, I mean, this is gaining a bit of momentum. Would you be happy for people to be wearing masks out in public? Do you think that should be made mandatory?
Look, I guess that's ultimately a matter for the medical professionals as to whether it's effective or not. Look, we are in a position where any efforts that people can make obviously are very, very important. That's a pretty small price. They say they're effective. If they're effective, that's great. I'd hate to see that, you know, as a person that's into freedoms and liberties, I'd hate to see it imposed unless absolutely necessary, but whatever works, this is too important. OK, well, you brought up Hong Kong there.
So China has responded overnight to that announcement yesterday that safe haven visas will be given to about 12,000 Hong Kongers so they can extend their stay in Australia. So China says it is a breach of international laws, and it says that no one should interfere with China's domestic affairs. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, look, the rhetoric is fairly predictable, I suppose. We've seen over the course of the last few months the regime in China take increasingly bold and bellicose steps to try and scare off these sorts of actions. Initially you might have thought, well, it's just aimed at us. It's not. We've seen very clearly now that the regime's aiming these targets all across the world. They've been having a go at Canada and the UK. And it does beg the question as to the position that Xi Jinping finds himself domestically. This wolf warrior diplomacy clearly has backfired. And the reality here is that there is a mutually beneficial relationship between China and Australia with respect to trade. Look, Australia is a country that thrives on democracy, freedom of speech and the rule of law. We need to continue doing what the Prime Minister is doing and pushing that message. Taking these steps, this suspension of the extradition treaty is absolutely outstanding, as is this announcement on the visas. I think we need to be bold and keep pressing through.
Are you expecting a trade backlash, Senator?
Well, I mean, what we've seen in the last few months would suggest there's likely to be some sort of rumbling coming out of the regime over there. As I said, these issues are very, very important. These issues of human rights and the rule of law, we must press on. I expect we'll see some rumblings, but we've got to march through it.
Okay, well, South Australian Liberal Senator Alex Antic, good to have your show. Good to have you on the show this morning. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. We'll chat to you again soon.